When I lived in London, it was the worst period of my life. Having fallen off my religion, hanging around with the wrong crowd, was even a point where I was being chased by a helicopter. Don't ask why. It's one thing committing a crime, it's another taking somebody's life. I lost 3 relatives. Wallahi, they were all in their 20s. One of them was my younger brother, was stabbed in the neck. People are looking at becoming Muslims and wallahi, this could put them off. You know how many times I've seen messages, they say, oh, I've left Christianity because of all of the disputes and the disagreements amongst them. And then I see Muslims behaving the way they are. I've come across studies where the peak of one's beauty is between the ages of 16 and 24. So you're taking all of these youngsters whose hormones have spiraled out of control and they are at the peak of their beauty and literally throwing them amongst one another. What do you think is going to happen?
A poet once said, I asked Allah to correct my niyyah. Next minute, I was reasoning with Abu Taymiyyah. Joining us today all the way from Leicester, UK is the renowned Islamic motivational speaker and Sheikh Ustadh Abu Taymiyyah. It's a pleasure to have you all the way in Sydney, Australia at the OnePath studio. Before we begin the podcast, a quick message from our sponsor. If you're Muslim and you care about your money, download this right now, the Halal Money app. An incredibly well-designed and easy-to-use financial app that allows you to open an account, deposit money, and spend through a Visa debit card they give you to use in your everyday transactions, away from the hands of a bank that's reveling in interest and even using your money in haram places. Download it now. Let's get back to the podcast. How are you finding the studio? It's your first time here at the OnePath studio. Yeah. How have you found it so
Honestly,
far?
I'm very happy to see that Muslims, right, have quality cameras of such.
Yes.
MashaAllah, as soon as we walked in, I think everybody can testify that we were really taken aback by the quality of things here.
Yes.
MashaAllah.
I believe we try to embody ihsan in everything that we do when it comes to our quality, when it comes to our cameras, when it comes to the videos that you're watching at home. So I hope you guys enjoy it. And Jazakallah khair for wearing the OnePath colors today on your famous dress. MashaAllah.
Is that what it is? I thought it was blue.
It's somewhat similar, so it's a bit of a teal blue, but tabarakallah, looks very good.
Yeah. And that's what Allah loves as well. You know, إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُحِبُّ لِأَحَدِكُمْ إِذَا عَمِلَ عَمَلًا يُتْقِنَهُ. Allah loves you that when you do something, do it properly.
Do it with
Try
excellence.
to pass, master it. And, yeah.
MashaAllah. We'll start off with a bit of rapid fire. On the topic of the headwear, this has become like your signature look. Talk us through it. Where's it from? What's it inspired by?
So, I think you can say the headwear. It's taken from the Yemenis and the Omanis and even the Emiratis.
Yes.
They all tend to wear it, but everyone wears it in a different way. So the Omanis, they wear it differently to the Yemenis. Or do they? Yes, the way they tie it up is very different. And then the Emiratis, they wear it a little bit differently as well. So we can maybe say it's like a Middle Eastern look, but the way I wear it, I think is a little bit different to all of them.
This is like your personal signature.
Yeah, AT tie, yani.
MashaAllah. Allah yabarak fik. Where can people buy them if they want to purchase them?
Well, you can buy it in Yemen. They have very good quality ones. I think you can find it also in the Arab world. You should generally be able to find it. There's this website that normally my admin, he always buys me these ghutras, this headwear. I think it's called Sumo something along the lines.
Discount code OPM, inshallah. That would be awesome.
No, I have no relationship with them. I'm not getting royalties for saying this, but to help a brother, if you can. I've never dealt with him. I don't know who he is, but the brother normally gets it from there. Yani.
MashaAllah. I'm sure many people would want to get the signature Abu Taymiyyah look. That would be awesome. Next question on the rapid fire. Football. There's a video of you scoring a goal on YouTube. How good are you at football? Do you have a past as a football up-and-coming sensation? What's the go?
So I've spoken about it. There's actually a video that's going to come out at the end of a lecture that I gave where I was speaking about the suffering of the Muslim Ummah. Right at the end, one brother asked this, right? Because it goes around amongst the shabab that apparently I was a professional footballer back in the day. I think they got the information a little bit wrong. So I was extremely quick.
Okay.
Right. Soccer player. You guys say soccer instead of
we say soccer here, but I think we've become accustomed to the British, we're gonna call it football now just because we've accustomed ourselves to it. Yeah.
So I was very quick, very it was actually my dad's fear for me to become a footballer.
Okay.
Yeah. Because of the lifestyle that comes with it. Not, of course, every single footballer has fallen off his religion.
Yes.
But, generally speaking, you see it's not the best of lifestyles that footballers and soccer players live.
Yes.
So this was the fear that my father had. And so one day...
you were promising. You were a promising footballer.
Yeah. Very talented, I believe, yeah. So one day, I was on my way to the trials for West Ham United. Probably heard of them?
No, I'm not a football fan. I'm sorry to our viewers at home, especially in UK.
The All Blacks, you guys watch the All Blacks.
Rugby league, rugby union,
Yeah. And subhanAllah, the night before that, I was showing my mother the football trainers that I just bought. And I forgot it in there. So I wake up in the morning, early morning, trying to get there early, and I realized that my football trainers are actually in my mother's room, my parents' room. So I'm crawling inside, hoping not to wake up my dad, knowing that my dad's going to be extremely opinionated about me going for these trials. And then he wakes up, right? And he's like, where are you going this morning? You normally don't leave the house at this morning. I was still a bit young, and I was like maybe 13, I think, 12, 13. And I said to him, Dad, I got trials and, West Ham United. And that's when he went into a full-blown lecture.
Wow.
To the point I ended up missing it. I would have not made it had I left after. And yeah, I think for the best,
Yeah, I'm sure you would have been devastated back then, but looking back now, you probably understand the wisdom.
Wallahi, everything happens for a reason. And sometimes we look back, we think to ourselves that if that didn't happen, we wouldn't have this today, right? Yeah. And that's the hikmah of Allah Azza wa Jal. Innahu huwa al-alim al-hakim. Allah is all knowing of every little thing that happens with you. And it happens under Allah Azza wa Jal's divine wisdom. Surah Yusuf. It's mentioned a number of times. These two names that are accompanied with one another through the trials that Yaqub alayhi salatu wasalam and Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam went through. Allah is knowing of everything that you're going through. Don't think, my brother and my sister, that is struggling, that Allah is unaware. But everything happens for a reason, right? He gets thrown into the well, and then he finds himself being brought up and nurtured in one of the most luxurious of places, right?
That's so beautiful.
Yeah, subhanAllah.
It's a beautiful way to look at it.
Yeah.
I was actually going to have another rapid fire on a verse that has helped you through difficulty, but you've kind of answered it right there.
I always mention Surah Yusuf. Surah Yusuf, it's my favorite chapter of the Quran. It is the chapter that I picked when I done a university tour. I did a 27 university tour in the UK, secular universities, and it was Surah Yusuf that we picked, right? Because Surah Yusuf, it has a variety of topics. People from different walks of life can relate. Mother, father, son, daughter, someone who's infatuated, struggling to overcome addictions, right? If you have been tortured, you have been oppressed, your rights have been taken away, abandoned, forsaken, right? He was thrown into prison. SubhanAllah, even the topic of Tawheed. أَأَرْبَابٌ مُتَفَرِّقُونَ خَيْرٌ أَمِ اللَّهُ الْوَاحِدُ الْقَهَّارُ. So SubhanAllah, everything you will find in Surah Yusuf, especially in today's day and age, what the shabab are suffering from. The part when she locked him inside of the room and she said, hey, Talak, let's get it on, and he ran away from her. SubhanAllah. We need to run away when people start slipping into your DMs and everything, right? Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam, this is what he done. He ran for his life the same way he would run from a lion, a predator, right? Yeah, I tried to link it with the life of the student. It's actually up on my YouTube channel. It's called Surah Yusuf like never before. And Allah, it helped change a lot of students' lives after listening to that lecture. It was just the same lecture that I repeated in all of these places because students are suffering from the exact same thing. And alhamdulillah, it brought about a lot of khair. Like when I look back, that university tour was one of my favorite projects.
MashaAllah.
Yeah.
No, it's got some
across the country,
very beautiful, powerful lessons. And that's exactly what I wanted to focus on in this podcast. We wanted to focus this podcast on the struggles and trials, the hardships that are facing the youth of our current generation. And you've obviously already mentioned a few that are present in Surah Yusuf, whether that be the trials with the opposite gender, which we will get to inshallah. But before we do that, Ustadh, there's been many videos that you've featured in whereby you take young groups of people, young groups of teenagers, people in their early 20s to Umrah. And I've personally watched some of these videos and I've been personally affected myself just seeing the way these short trips that you take these kids on absolutely changes them for the better. What's the secret behind these gatherings, these groups that you go upon that causes such change?
when we just look at the Kaaba, right? Allah tells us in the Quran, إِنَّ أَوَّلَ بَيْتٍ وُضِعَ لِلنَّاسِ لَلَّذِي بِبَكَّةَ مُبَارَكًا وَهُدًى لِلْعَالَمِينَ. It is blessed and it is a guidance for mankind, right? I remember, subhanAllah, when I flipped my life around, it was after we went to Umrah. When I lived in London, it was the worst period of my life in terms of istiqamah, having fallen off my religion, hanging around with the wrong crowd. There was even a point where I was being chased by a helicopter. Don't ask why. Kamil.
I think I've seen the video already on YouTube.
Yeah, so يعني it was not يعني something that I'm proud of. It wasn't my proudest moment as Muhammad, right? And when my parents moved us out from London to Leicester, the first thing that we done was go to Umrah. And wallahi, it really helped me purify my life. It really, really did, to the point where when my family was leaving, I wanted to hide behind one of the pillars of the Haram and just run away from them. You know, it has an impact. I'm sure you guys saw this video of DJ Khalid, right? DJ Khalid, who is surrounded with filth, engaging in haram and whatever have you, right? Subhanallah, upon seeing the Kaaba, he left him in tears. This is someone who you could perhaps say like his heart has, with everything around him, has become very polluted. But upon seeing the Kaaba, he left him in tears. Like people like that are being left in tears. So, how about anybody else? So it really, really impacted me and it helped me flip my life around. So when we see a lot of these shabab, right, deep inside, Habibi, they know. The brothers, may Allah reward them. I'm not the one that was really organizing this kind of Umrah group. It was some brothers, they called it Umrah with the Mandem. And they would take some of the students of knowledge to give them that reminder. Wallahi, those brothers done an amazing job with those brothers on the streets. And, it would be very, very intimate, spending a lot of time with them, speaking to them heart to heart. Wallahi, I remember I sat down with a brother in front of the Kaaba, right in front of the Kaaba, who was not living the best lifestyle. And I said to him, Akhi, please, don't let it be that I give the reminder at your janazah. Like he would say to me, he can't leave his house except with knives, right? And then he broke down into tears. He probably never cried before that, But being around the Kaaba, it has that impact, wallah. It really, really does.
The power of the environment, literally taking yourself out of the streets of London, the streets of Leicester, wherever you may be, and literally forcing yourself to be in the presence of the Kaaba, the holy house, the place where Ibrahim was, Ismail was, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam was. The presence of that environment can shape you.
Yeah, without a shadow of a doubt.
But let's go back to the streets of UK. From what we're seeing, there's a knife crime epidemic, right? Last week, we literally saw a viral video of a Muslim taxi driver literally becoming a getaway driver for a victim of a knife crime. He's screaming at him, get away, get away. I'm sure many of our viewers would have seen the video. This is the reality in the streets of UK. And there are also some similar parallels in Sydney, unfortunately, as well. I know that this has been an issue that you have dealt with personally, whether you were running away from helicopters or, dealing with the youth that are involved in this. What has your experience been like and where is the solution?
It's very, very common, especially in places like London. It's become like the capital for knife crimes. Other places, I would say it's a lot less. It's mainly in London. And you have, of course, a lot of the gangs. And I could perhaps put it down to a number of things as to why maybe Muslims are getting involved in this kind of lifestyle. Habibi Kamal, I sometimes believe, the kaba'ir, right? And Al-Hajjawai, rahimahullah ta'ala, was from the Hanbali scholars. He has a manzuma, a poem, which covers many of the kaba'ir. And I honestly believe in times like this, it needs to be revived. It needs to be brought back to life. Because we're at a point where falling into these major sins has almost become an easy thing to do, right? And we're living in the end of times. The awakening program that we done yesterday in the hall, I went through some of the minor signs, right, at the end of times. And many of them have already become, a reality, if not all of them. And I honestly believe if we instilled within the shabab the dangers of taking a life and we regurgitated this time and time again, I think, honestly, they would perhaps refrain from a lot of that which they do, right? It's one thing committing a crime, it's another taking somebody's life, right? The Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he told us in a narration, لهدم الكعبة حجرا حجرا. Right? To destroy the Kaaba, to destroy the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Like, would you ever think about, Kamal, like if you went to the Kaaba and someone decided to strike it or to punch it? Like, I don't think that will ever cross somebody's mind. Here, the narration states destroying it. Right? And removing parts of the Kaaba one after the other, walking out of the Haram with parts of the Kaaba. Like, imagine that thought for a moment. That's still not as great as taking the life of a Muslim. Right? One time Ibn Umar radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, he looked at the Kaaba and he said, ما أعظمك وأعظم حرمتك والمؤمن عند الله أعظم حرمة منك. Right? How sacred and how honorable is the Kaaba. Right? However, the life, the sanctity of a Muslim is far greater. Right? In another narration, the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he told us, من آذى مسلما, right? فَكَأَنَّمَا هَدَمَ بَيْتَ اللَّهِ. Whoever harms a Muslim, it is as if he has destroyed the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The narrations are many. Right? Like, we're being told by the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, إِذَا الْتَقَى الْمُسْلِمَانِ بِسَيْفَيْهِمَا فَالْقَاتِلُ وَالْمَقْتُولُ فِي النَّارِ. When two Muslims, they square up to one another, both the killer and the one being killed, they're both in hellfire. So the companions, they asked, we understand the killer, what about the one who was killed? إِنَّهُ كَانَ حَرِيصًا عَلَى قَتْلِ صَاحِبِهِ. He was extremely eager, likewise, to kill his brother. Right? Just squaring up, knowing that you are going to book your seat in the hellfire. Right? As you are now engaging in this crime. Another narration, subhanAllah, the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he told us, لَيَأْتِي عَلَى النَّاسِ زَمَانٌ. There will come a time, لَا يَدْرِ الْقَاتِلْ فِيمَا قَتَلْ وَلَا يَدْرِ الْمَقْتُولْ فِيمَا قُتِلْ. The one killing doesn't know why he's killing. The one killed, he doesn't know why he's been killed. Brothers and sisters, wallahi, just if we kept on repeating this all the time, talked about the seriousness of something, and I'm sure you'll agree, right? It's called the desensitization process. In whatever it might be. You could be propagating that which is degenerate, but the more you speak about it, the more one subconsciously now begins to, right, observe and also embrace, right? And I'm sure if we done that and we kept on speaking about it, hopefully it will have eventually an impact on the hearts of our shabab. That's with everything that is now being normalized in terms of major sins and filth and degeneracy, that which is abhorrent and despicable. We're not speaking about it enough.
It's funny that everything that you're saying, you're giving like hadith after hadith, you're giving hadith after hadith, you're giving Quran verse after Quran verse. But guess what's happening, Ustadh? You have this coming through one ear, like this podcast literally going through one ear, and what's going in through the other ear? All the rap songs, the music that are glorifying, shanks and shivs, like, stabbing people, how glorious it is to stab someone, the great feeling that you get around stabbing someone. So it's like a battle out there for hearts and minds that is taking place simultaneously right now. So I can just imagine the difficulty it is in stressing the importance of what we're saying right now, but then look what we're up against, inshallah. Ustadh, also on this topic of celebrities and music and the pop culture, which is having an influence, on the other side, we're also seeing that pop culture slowly is being influenced by Islam. And I'm going to qualify that in the sense that we're seeing celebrities use Islamic phrases like Alhamdulillah. We're seeing rappers use the word Alhamdulillah. We're seeing Islamic values, Islamic practices, customs becoming apparent in mainstream pop culture. In your opinion, is this a good thing or a bad thing? Where do we draw the line?
Well, I think you can look at it maybe from two angles. Yani, it's good that Islam is becoming so much more popular and mainstream. It's reaching the people are becoming exposed to it through social media. And the people that they are around, people are becoming so much more comfortable and proud about being a Muslim. Like once upon a time, that wasn't the case. Like us growing up, one would try to hide his Muslim identity in order to try and fit in. Now it's actually become something cool to be Muslim. Right? So that aspect is no longer present. But at the same time, right, it's a responsibility upon the Muslims who are around these non-Muslims, who are using our religion in music, for you to advise them, Habibi, our religion, our Islamic teachings, it's not like a joke, yani, it's not for rap, it's not for music. Islam, right, is built on ta'zeem, glorification of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is a responsibility. It's one thing committing a sin, right? Engaging in haram. It's another making a mockery out of the ayat, right? This is actually extremely, extremely dangerous. It's not a joke, yani. It's not a light matter, right? And they do it as a joke sometimes. Wallahi, wallahi. You'll hear rappers say, wallahi, yani, because we're using it so excessively. Yani, it's ajib, yani. Honestly, ajib. At the time, wallahi, you're swearing by Allah Azza wa Jal, right? You're swearing by the creator, the sustainer, the disposer of all affairs. You're not swearing on yani, some random individual. And people are joking around and playing around with these terms and using in their music, pop
Even
songs.
non-Muslims are using the word wallahi. It's become like common in their vernacular as well.
There has to be a line that is drawn. Religion is a no-go. If you commit a sin, I ask Allah Azza wa Jal to help you in overcoming that sin. You're a rapper and whatever have you, you can always engage. I speak to rappers, sit down with them. We have lunch at times. You know, we talk. I try to give them whatever guidance is possible. And they know what they're doing is wrong.
Yes.
Right? And these Muslim rappers that I sometimes sit with, Islam is a no-go. They understand the severity of it. Right? And then you have these non-Muslims making light of the situation. And they're probably thinking it's fine because, all of my other Muslim rappers that are my friends, they don't have a problem with it. No, it's a responsibility upon you. Like I said, committing a sin is one thing. It's another, you know, playing around with it or making light of it and using it in this kind of situation, which is so much more severe.
So there is a line that we can clearly draw between, you know, making fun of Islam or using Islam to take the mickey out of Islam or, you know, making a mockery of Islam. That's obviously something which we should definitely avoid, and it's haram and we should keep away from. But in terms of like how they've been able to normalize Islam, we can say perhaps that is a okay thing which has allowed Islam to become a little bit more accessible, you would say?
Yeah, without a shadow of a doubt. I think that's the good thing about the situation itself, the fact that it's reaching all these people. Right? It's becoming so much more mainstream.
Yes.
People are aware of it. They're looking into the Quran, especially after the whole Palestinian situation.
Yes.
You know, I came across a stat. There's been a 400% increase of conversions across Europe. Right? It's becoming so much more mainstream. It's mainly young people that are looking into Islam because of some of these influences that have maybe become Muslim or they use Muslim terms and whatever have you. But at the end of the day, the fact that it is misused doesn't make it actually okay.
Yes.
Right? It reminds me of a hadith when the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, Inna Allah yu'ayyidu hadha ad-din bi rajulin fajir. Allah Azza wa Jal, right, gives aid and assistance to the religion through a transgressing individual.
Yes. I've
right?
seen that. Very pity.
SubhanAllah. So you'll get somebody coming out and Islam, and he himself isn't a Muslim. And he's practicing all types of filth and evil. But through him, Allah Azza wa Jal guides many, right?
Yes. I wanted to bring up a contemporary topic right now. Over the weekend, we saw perhaps one of the most despicable opening ceremonies for the Olympics, whereby they made a complete mockery of the Last Supper, like a revered occasion in the Christian tradition. People were commenting they would have never done this to Islam. And now, of course, we are equally as offended when you make a mockery of Jesus as you would of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We revere the prophets. This is something which is disgraceful, and we condemn them to the nth degree.
Without a shadow of a doubt.
Any prophet you make a mockery of. But people are saying that, you know, they would have never done this to Islam. So on this topic, what is the difference between Christianity and Islam that makes Islam so off limits?
And I think here it's important to mention that we as Muslims are principles.
Yes.
Are principled, right? And we hold on to our morals and our values. And this is what makes us the Muslims that we are, right? And over time, what's unfortunately happened is, and even Christians say this all the time, when you see, right, that which was normative being tampered around with, trying to facilitate for everything and anything, people eventually will begin to lose trust, right? People, just generally speaking, that which is innate within them is being principled, having those morals and those values, right? Not being pushed around, being someone who, this is what I believe, this is what I stand for. And wallahi, people appreciate that.
Yes.
Right? And like you mentioned, subhanAllah, Jesus alayhi salatu wasalam is our prophet. Wallahi, made my blood boil when I saw that.
Yes.
We get very enraged when we see the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam being vilified.
Yes.
The same should be when it comes to Jesus alayhi salatu wasalam. I remember, this is many, many years ago, right? I walked past a church and they had right? A statue of Jesus, right? That they depict as Jesus, right? Standing like being crucified on the cross. And there were Muslims there laughing at it. This is, I'm talking about many, many years ago. I was a lot younger. And then later on, as we studied, that image never really left my head. Like, we as Muslims can't be Muslims if we don't believe in Jesus alayhi salatu wasalam. لا نفرق بين أحد منهم. Right? And unfortunately, this is exactly now what's happened, right? When you look at the situation, because those who are meant to be championing Jesus alayhi salatu wasalam, they haven't done their, what is required of them. And people more and more are losing respect for the religion itself and their figures, and becoming more inclined towards Islam, gravitating towards what Muslims are upon. So,
SubhanAllah.
yeah.
And I feel like when it comes to our principles, we are more strict in upholding them. One of the ayat that, screams out to me in this regard is like the ayah in, I think, Surah Al-Hujurat, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He tells us, لا ترفعوا أصواتكم فوق صوت النبي. Like, do not raise your voice above the messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Like, look at the respect our religion demands.
SubhanAllah, without a shadow of a doubt. Let alone be laughing and making a mockery out of it. And before that, SubhanAllah, I can't remember exactly when it was. I think it was the Super Bowl. They kicked the Bible.
Yes.
Right? As if they are trying to present to the people, look, take religion out of the equation, right? Live and let be. So religion is that which is what? Holding us back. When in reality, Habibi, where do you draw the line with regards to what is right and what is wrong? Right? As the morality compass is shifting, once upon a time, certain practices were considered extremely immoral. It was considered despicable within the West. And now you're seeing, subhanAllah, everything that's being normalized is being justified, is being popularized. And where do you draw the line with regards to what is right and what is wrong? Right? This is why, subhanAllah, people are left in confusion. They don't know how to structure their lives because everyone wants to do what they want. Live and let be. Liberal values. Right? Again, where do you draw the line? Even when I arbitrate between husbands and wives, they're going at one another. She's saying, I want this. He's saying, no, I want this. Where do you draw the line with regards to what is right and what is wrong? Even this whole issue of love. So-and-so can love this and love that. This is the argument that they use. Love is love. Where do you draw the line with regards to if someone now wants to love something completely different? That is considered a criminal offense in today's day and age. Where do you draw the line? Right? I'll maybe share a story, subhanAllah, of an experience I had last time round when I came to Australia. I was on Indian Airways, one of the worst airways you can actually, or airlines that you can take. Wallahi, it was horrendous, right? When we got to India, New Delhi, as we were on transit, right? I ran into a guy called Mark. We'll call him Mark. I was so bored. I was tired. I couldn't read. And I said, you know what? Let me just start engaging with him, right? Maybe some good's going to come out of this conversation. And I said to him, Mark, like, why are you going all the way to Australia by yourself? Why would you do that to yourself? Right? Going to Australia reminded me of the hadith, السفر قطعة من العذاب. يعني traveling is like a portion of a punishment. يعني wallahi, 20 hours going down under, it's not an easy experience. And I asked him, why are you going to Australia? Because I know why I'm going to Australia. I'm going to, engage with my brothers and sisters. He said to me he was meant to be going with his girlfriend, and they split up just before their trip to Australia. So me feeling very nosy at the time, I asked him, why'd you guys split up? And he said to me, I didn't like the fact that she was having inappropriate conversations with the opposite gender. This is a non-Muslim saying this.
It's a fitrah.
And the fact that she was wearing revealing clothes outside. He said that didn't sit well with me. So me playing devil's advocate to stimulate his mind, I said to him, Mark, why are you being so overprotective? Why are you being so rough and tough? So controlling? Live and let be. He goes, no, I'm not comfortable with it. So I said to him, what are you going to do when you go to Australia? He goes, I'm looking for new love. Like he's coming to get one of you guys, right? And I said to him, what makes you think now that this new love is not going to do the exact same thing? He goes, no, she'll be a lot better. I said to him, Mark, this is why you have Islam. The Muslimah, the believing woman, she has a legislation that she adheres to. She believes in a greater and higher entity, and that is Allah, who gives her rules and regulations, right? You don't even need to push her around. right? This experience that you're having now, if you marry a practicing woman that adheres to the laws of Allah, this is something that he wouldn't need to worry about. Wallah, his jaw dropped. He's thinking about conversion now, right? The point is, subhanAllah, we can look at this issue in just about every position of society or every case of society. Clashes that are happening between husbands and wives, people within the community, within families, brothers and their sisters, right? We're going to have disputes. وَلَا يَزَالُونَ مُخْتَلِفِينَ إِلَّا مَا رَحِمَ رَبُّكَ. However, okay, where do you draw the line? How do you deal with the situation? فَإِن تَنَازَعْتُمْ فِي شَيْءٍ فَرُدُّوهُ إِلَى اللَّهِ وَالرَّسُولِ. You have a dispute, go back to Allah Azza wa Jal, His Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. You just have to accept that Allah Azza wa Jal is the greater and higher entity above everything else. Otherwise, we will continue clashing with one another. And there will continue to be problems on every level of society, like the one that Mark is going through.
What a story to tell. And it just reveals...
It's an Australian experience.
Yeah, it literally reveals the innate disposition of man to like be protective over his wife. And for a wife to also like be protective over a husband, because obviously it goes both ways without saying. You've kind of segued into our next topic, which is like perhaps the biggest topic right now when it comes to the youth and the young generation. And that is the struggle to find love, the struggle to get married. There is a marriage crisis in Australia, in UK, in the West, Muslims struggling to get married. And unfortunately, as a result, they've fallen into inappropriate relationships, inappropriate interaction with the opposite gender. Through your experience and your work, what are some of the biggest contributing factors to the marriage crisis we're seeing right now? Where is the root of the problem?
I think there's a number of things that we can mention. I think if we take a good look at ourselves in the mirror, we might be part of the problem. The fact that we're making it so much more harder upon our youth.
Yes.
Habibi, when you think about it, right, Kamal, I've come across studies where the peak of one's beauty is between the ages of 16 and 24. Yeah. This is the peak.
You're still beautiful, Sheikh.
I'm getting grey hairs, Habibi. So I'm not saying after that you become ugly, just in case somebody takes what I'm about to say out of context. No, we're talking about being beautiful and more beautiful. لَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ فِي أَحْسَنِ تَقْوِيمٍ. Everyone has been perfected in the way Allah Azza wa Jal has created them. But this is the peak of their beauty. What are you doing, right? When you think about it, this is the age when normally they're in university. So you're taking all of these youngsters whose hormones have spiraled out of control and they are at the peak of their beauty and literally throwing them amongst one another. What do you think is going to happen? And also, subhanAllah, when you think about it, right, you have the non-Muslims, they enjoy themselves on Friday nights. They fulfill their desires. While we are telling this young Muslim brother and sister to stay away from haram, to lower their gaze, ila akhirih, right? Do you not feel that they're disadvantaged compared to everyone else? And the moment they approach their parents, they get mocked. They get told, get your act together, control yourself. Oh, parents, right? We're not living how we used to live once upon a time in places like India, Pakistan, Lebanon, Somalia, Yemen, the Arab world. It's very, very different. We live in a polarized, sexualized society, right? Yani, this is the reality of the matter. It's hard, extremely, extremely hard. And I said this to our brothers and sisters yesterday when we had the Awakening event, when I talked about the signs of the hour. I talked about how difficult it is, and I'm not going to sit here and talk as if it's easy.
Yes.
Wallahi, it's not easy, right? And talked about the virtues of holding on to your religion, but at the same time, it's not easy. Like making it easy, right? I think we have to drop the bar when it comes to muhur. I'm hearing crazy numbers. I'm not saying that...
The dowry.
Yeah, the dowry. I'm not saying that there shouldn't be a mahar. Of course not, right? There should be, but we really need to think about the current situation. It's so easy for them to go and commit haram. Once upon a time, I'm sure you remember, Kamal, right? If somebody wanted to do haram inside of his house, he'd go sit in the living room with those big Dell computers, right? You know, the big backs. And he's got the webcam on MSN, right? It'd be so much more harder to access haram. And as he is accessing the haram, he's watching the door, hoping that he doesn't get caught out. Nobody in the right mind would take that big Dell computer and place it under the blankets. Nobody would do that. Now, Habib is a fingertip away, right? ordering escorts, watching pornography. It's a fingertip away.
Becomes super
So much more
accessible.
easier.
Yeah. And I love what you mentioned. Like, we can continue giving you the tools, like lower your gaze, perhaps fast, make yourself strong, have that discipline. But that's not that's not a permanent solution. That's not a permanent fix. That will be like a little band-aid that you're going to put on right now. But the solution to the problem is obviously facilitating marriage, making it easier, lowering the mahar for, within reason, of course. If it is being extravagant, take it easy. But at the same time, there's also parents, unfortunately, playing a difficult role when it comes to this. They're putting limitations. She has to be, or he has to be, from a certain tribe, a certain village, a certain city. What are your thoughts in the restrictions and limitations the parents are imposing, and what have you seen throughout your work?
Shall I tell you something, Kamal?
Yes.
You know how many times I've come across a parent who made things difficult, and they weren't really valid reasons. The grounds were pretty trivial, when you think about it, and wallahi ended up regretting it. Right? His daughter just went and committed a zina and brought a non-Muslim home. Right? And the brother that, subhanAllah, she initially asked to get married to, he was a lovely brother. But just because, as you mentioned, he was maybe from a different village or a different tribe, or over things like that. And subhanAllah, in times like this, it reminds me of when the Messenger ﷺ said, "Man ataakum tardawna deenahu wa khuluqahu fazawijuh." Whoever comes to you and you're satisfied with his religion and etiquette, marry him off. إِلَّا تَفْعَلُوا تَكُنْ فِتْنَةٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ وَفَسَادٌ عَرِيضٌ. Either you do that, otherwise you will see mass corruption. The corruption that we see, pornography, right? Doing haram, it's become so much more easier than it was once upon a time, right? And like uncle, auntie that are listening, would you prefer for your daughter, right, that goes to these universities and craziness is happening in these universities and she's trying to remain chaste, right? Would you prefer for her to come home impregnated?
Yes.
Which is so easy. Wallah, I speak sometimes to secondary school teachers. I don't know what you guys call it secondary?
Yeah, we call it high school.
High school, secondary. I speak to the teachers. They're doing stuff inside of the classrooms. Sometimes they'll sneak in and then they get caught. Like, that was really unheard of when I was growing up, right? It wasn't really that well known. It's now like, because of pornography, they start fantasizing certain acts and certain things that they want to do, and they just start carrying it out. This is what this generation, Gen Z, right, is exposed to, right? May Allah Azza wa Jalla protect. Wallah, it scares the living daylight out of me. I have two beautiful daughters, right? They're only 3 and 1. Bringing them up in this kind of environment, it scares the living daylight out of me. It really, really does.
Allah yahfadhum, right? Allah protect them both.
I mean,
Ustadh, you've mentioned 2 things, 2 qualities. The one who comes to you and you are pleased with his deen and his khuluq, his religion and his character, his etiquette. What advice would you give to our, the shabab, young boys right now who want to equip themselves, to ready themselves for marriage? You've mentioned 2 things: get their deen in check, get their etiquette in check. Like, literally, there's a distinction between the 2 of them. They're not literally packed together. You can have deen without khuluq. What advice would you give to the young shabab that want to ready themselves for marriage right now?
My advice would be to learn about how to be a husband and a wife.
Okay.
Right? You know how we learn about at-tahara in order to be able to do a wudu properly. Likewise, when it comes to the salah, we learn about it, right? Month of Ramadan kicks in, we're in the masjid learning about the ahkam of fasting and so on and so forth. Likewise, marriage needs to have the exact same approach. Recently, I discovered that in Malaysia, you need a certificate before you get married. You have to do a course, right? I arbitrate between husbands and wives all the time, right? Young people getting married, mashallah, they're trying to do the right thing. They want to keep themselves chaste. After they get into the marriage, they're already thinking about, the grass is green on the other side. Habibi, there's still a long way to go. Ask your parents how many times they've argued and they've found themselves disputing with one another. It's bound to happen, right? The maturity and so on and so forth, I think it can be developed through sitting with people of knowledge and experience. Extremely, extremely important, right? To learn about how to be a husband and a wife. And unfortunately, and I know it may come across a little bit as generalizing, but many many youngsters today that get married, they don't know how to be husbands and wives.
Yeah.
Sometimes when I look at why he wants to divorce her, or why she wants out of the relationship, or she thinks that the grass is green on the other side, well, that's absolutely pathetic. Absolutely pathetic and trivial compared to, subhanAllah, some of the cases that we used to deal with maybe 7, 8 years ago, 10 years ago, that we used to hear about as to why two people have separated from one another. Right?
Perhaps there were valid reasons, and now we're seeing like
there were valid reasons. Maybe it's a last resort. At-talaq is a solution to a problem. It's disliked, right? However, it is a solution to a problem. Islam doesn't tell you or doesn't impose upon you to stay in an abusive relationship.
Of course.
Right? There's a process that you follow. And then as a last resort, they can separate. وَإِنْ يَتَفَرَّقَ يُغْنِ اللَّهُ كُلًّا مِنْ سَعَتِهِ. We have a whole chapter that speaks about at-talaq. It's been named after the term at-talaq. It's been, so it's a solution to a problem. Does that make sense?
Yes.
But today, like, over the most, like, she did this and she did. Have this conversation with one another. She's lived a life for the last 25 years, or however long it may have been, living her life in a certain way. Now she's met someone who's also been living a very different type of lifestyle. Before the marriage, everyone's on their best behavior. But now, my brother, you have to wake up to morning breath. You have to wake up to the reality, right? You have to be engaging with one another. You're going to see something that you don't like about her.
Yeah.
And the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he told us, لا يفرق مؤمن مؤمنة. The believing man should not hate the believing woman. In كره منها خلقا رضي منها آخر. If there's something about it that he dislikes, there's something else that he likes about her. No one's going to be perfect. You are not going to find a woman or a man that is perfect in every sense. This fairy tales that you guys see online of the ideal spouses and the ideal couples and whatever have you, relationship goals, you'll find the hashtag, and that's 30 seconds of people's lives.
Yes.
And you're constantly comparing your marriage to them. And you're only seeing 30 seconds, Habibi.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And then later on you find out that they've separated from one another. And we've had recent cases where people started commenting, Wallahi, if they've, separated, then I've lost complete hope in marriage. No, of course, that shouldn't be the case. There's a protocol that we follow as Muslims in how to be husbands and wives. It's built on what? Compassion and mercy. It doesn't always have to be, militant. You have to do this. No, it's built on what? Rahmah, compassion. And we have laws that we adhere to, right?
Yeah.
And we refer to these laws when we have disputes. وهكذا.
Yes.
Right.
And it comes with, I guess, there's a lot of maturity that's involved. So while we did qualify at the start that we encourage the youth and the younger generations to get married and for the parents to facilitate the marriage and make marriage easy, at the same time, we do also stress the importance of having that maturity. Having that deen, having your religious knowledge, but also having that maturity in your etiquette when it comes to perhaps dealing with your finances, dealing with grievances you have with the spouse. And not to downplay anyone who has, unfortunately went through divorce or anything like that. Because this is what happens. This is the sunnah of life. Things happen. Jazakallah.
Sometimes divorce, subhanAllah, is one of the best things that happens to an individual, right? You go through the hardships and difficulties of divorce, not because Allah wants to break you, but because He wants to bring you back up stronger. Right? Wallah, when you read Surah Al-Talaq, when Allah talks about وَمَن يَتَّقِ اللَّهَ يَجْعَلْ لَهُ مَخْرَجًا,
yes,
whoever comes with a taqwa, meaning does the right thing, فعل الطاعات واجتناب المنهيات, right? Allah opens doors for him. وَيَرْزُقْهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَحْتَسِبْ. يعني he's tried everything possible.
Yes.
Right? He's had taqwa of Allah Azza wa Jal. Allah is not telling him to stay in an abusive relationship. Right? There's a limit. We are human beings. وَيَرْزُقْهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَحْتَسِبْ. Allah will provide for him from where he doesn't expect. And this is being mentioned in the chapter of At-Talaq to show you if you do the right thing, and sometimes it gets very toxic when they're separating from one another. She or he tries to get out everything in order to tarnish that person's image. You're being told to do the right thing, doors will be open for you, right? Yeah.
Jazakallah khairan for that, Ustadh. We've covered many different topics. We've covered, street violence. We've covered social media influencers. We've covered the difficulties of marriage and many different issues that are pertaining to the youth. I want to move on to dealing with differences. So as a young Muslim, trying to navigate the ummah, trying to navigate my space in the Muslim world. I might be in UK, might be in Australia. I see many different Muslims, different methodologies, different ways of practicing the deen. How do I navigate this, and how do we foster a sense of unity amongst the Muslim community so that it becomes like a wholesome community to be in, and not one that's divisive, and not one which, you know, pushes me away as opposed to bringing me towards Islam?
Yeah. I think it's important to realize that differences have been around for over 1200 years. And Allah tells us, وَلَا يَزَالُونَ مُخْتَلِفِينَ إِلَّا مَنْ رَحِمَ رَبُّكَ.
Yes.
Right? They will continue to differ with one another. And this is bound to happen. Right? And of course, unity at the same time is, من مقاصد الشريعة, من أعظم مقاصد الشريعة, from the greatest of objectives. And sometimes we forget this. Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala, he says, من القواعد العظيمة التي هي من جماع الدين. Right? It's from the things that comprise the religion. The greatest of principles, إصلاح ذات البين, fixing that which is between the people, واجتماع الكلمة, to come together, إلى آخره. So this is an important objective, and it's mentioned time and time again. من الذين فرقوا دينهم وكانوا شيعا. يعني that defamed in the Quran those who split up from one another. واعتصموا بحبل الله جميعا ولا تفرقوا. Hold fast onto the rope of Allah, that which Allah has sent down and what the Messenger ﷺ came with, and do not, disunite amongst one another. So these differences have been around, and I don't think, these differences will come to an end. It will continue up until Qiyam as-Sa'ah, as we've already seen happening. Right? And even if you look at the state today, when you look back, it seems it's a lot more now, and it's becoming even more and more toxic. When you think about it, Habibi, look, the time and age that we live in. And I remember Shaykh Al-Albani rahimahullah ta'ala was mentioning something similar to this. We are at war with the enemies of Islam. They are targeting us from every single direction. He at the time was speaking about the secularists who are targeting the Muslims and whatever have you. Right? So we are being bombarded from every single angle. Right? I am for having these theological discussions and discourses, but not the way that it's happening right now on X and likewise on TikTok. And this is across the spectrum. It gets very volatile. It gets very toxic. They're screaming at one another, insulting each other's sheikhs. I don't believe this is the way forward. I honestly suggest, and this is advice that I'm giving to people of authority and students of knowledge, you want to have these discussions, right? Go into a room and fight each other if you have to, figuratively speaking. Have these discussions. I always, wallahi, I sit with people from different leanings and persuasions, right? I'm of the position of Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala, where this is, contingent on weighing between the pros and the cons. There are people that are sincere, that don't have the same belief as me, and we have these discussions in a civilized, productive manner, right? It's important to have these conversations. And, I remember coming across something very powerful of Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala when he was talking about the disagreements between the Hanabila and the Asha'ira, right? And he would say, I would be from those who would really go out his way to remove these differences. He has a belief system which he sees to be correct, and he's like, having these conversations in a pragmatic way, and after that, Habibi, you can't control people's hearts. Everyone goes their way, right? To have these discussions in a controlled environment behind closed doors, especially now when there are so many non-Muslims looking at the Muslims and that which is taking place online. People are looking at becoming Muslims, and wallahi, this could put them off. You know how many times I've seen messages, and this is a huge mafsada that we have to take into consideration. The issue of pros and cons, masalih and mafasid. They say, I've left Christianity because of all of the disputes and the disagreements amongst them. And then I see Muslims behaving the way they are. Right? Which may actually serve as a deterrent from them entering into Islam. And I honestly believe this is something we have to take into consideration, especially right now with what's happening. It's become so much more intensified. Lines have been drawn, sides have been chosen, and things are only getting worse. When the chicken comes home to roost, they're not going to distinguish between, this guy is from this group, this guy is from that group. They look at all of you as Muslims, right? And they'll deal with you exactly the same. Right? And it's getting more and more problematic. So I honestly believe despite all of these differences in theology, there has to be a level of maturity at times when it comes to common issues that we have to come together on in the face of, right, the oppressors, right? The suppressors, the enemies who are causing the Muslims problems. You have to at times come together to deal with it. If you don't want to work with each other on anything other than that, fine. But these common issues, there has to be a level of coming together and dealing with it collectively.
And given that, I guess it's becoming very public, the nature of the infighting and the criticisms, even, how would you yourself, I'm sure you've experienced some criticism in the past for some of your views or even your opinions. How have you been able to navigate that and manage that?
Well, I continue to teach that which, inshallah, I believe to be the truth. What else can I do? I continue teaching what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says and what the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam came to us with, what the righteous predecessors would teach us as much as I can. Like, Kamal, if I buckle to every form of pressure that comes my way, I'll never be able to get anything done. People are always going to criticize, right? Imam Malik rahimahullah ta'ala has a powerful statement. He would say, أصلح ما بينك وبين الله يصلح الله ما بينك وبين الناس. Rectify that which is between you and Allah will rectify that which is between you and the people. رضا الناس غاية لا تدرك.
Yes.
As Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha mentioned, pleasing everyone is an objective you can't meet. I am not perfect.
Yes.
Right? I'm open to dialogue. I'm open to discourse. Wallah, across the spectrum, sometimes, subhanAllah, it's ajib. But at the end of the day, what you see surfacing online is an echo chamber.
Yes.
On the ground, it's so much more different. Those who are engaging in these volatile, toxic discussions. Like I said, I'm very for the discussions. Go do it behind closed doors and continue preaching what you see to be correct, right? But this thing that we see on X, on Twitter, on TikTok, honestly, I'm really not for it at all. And this is why I've refused to engage in discussions where I've been invited by individuals who tend to behave in this way, because I believe there's no maslahah that's going to come out of it. Even coming to Australia, going to South Africa, because I was in South Africa beforehand, there were people that were reaching out, knowing how they behave online. I just excuse myself. But others, I'll have a sit down. Like, I'm always for to being corrected, right? I don't believe that I'm infallible and that everything that I know is 110% correct.
Yes.
There might be things that we've looked at in a certain way, certain things that I could have perhaps said better. Like recently, there's an issue that I put a clarification out on. And we live and we learn.
Yes.
Right? We live and we learn. And we are human beings that make mistakes. And as a brother, you reach out to him. Al-mu'minu mir'atun mu'min. He is the mirror of his believer. Tries to perhaps convince him that perhaps that which he said wasn't really correct.
Yes.
I don't think any of us are worse than Fir'aun.
Yes.
Right? I don't think any of us are. Fir'aun who claimed, أَنَا رَبُّكُمُ الْأَعْلَى. I'm your Lord, the Most High. مَا عَلِمْتُ لَكُم مِّنْ إِلَهٍ غَيْرِي. I haven't come of a Lord more greater than myself. This is what he's telling the people. He claimed this, subhanAllah. Even then, Allah instructed Musa, alayhi salam, and also Harun to go to Fir'aun and to speak to him. فَقُولَ لَهُ قَوْلًا لَيِّنًا لَعَلَّهُ يَتَذَكَّرُ وَيَخْشَى. Speak to him in words of gentleness. Recently, a brother messaged me, wallahi, on Twitter, and he was very, very abusive. And he insulted me. And I said to him, do you really think you're going to convince me like this?
Yes.
Right? He goes, oh, but you said X, Y, and Z. Okay, طيب. We speak to non-Muslims all the time who claim about Allah that He has a son. Is there anything greater than that? Should we speak to them in this kind of manner? So how are you expecting to convince me, right?
Yes.
With this kind of attitude, throwing all this abuse at me?
Yes.
I said to him, am I worse than Fir'aun? Are you better than Musa?
Yes.
And Harun alayhi salatu wassalam? And wallahi, credit to him. He said, Jazakallah khair. You're right. And I said to him, here you go, kada wa kada wa kada. And he goes, okay, I apologize.
I think the etiquette of dealing with the Muslim community, dealing with each other, making sure that our community is a welcoming community for the Muslims, because we've literally just mentioned only a fraction of the challenges and hardships and trials that the young generation are going through right now. The least we can do is make the Muslim ummah, within our ability, a place which is welcoming, a place which is safe, so that they can come in, because they're being called away. We need to call them back.
I honestly believe the online space is a bubble. Like on the ground, Habibi, subhanAllah, the brothers and sisters that attended our program, I think it would have come up to like 1,500 people. Like they're in a completely different world compared to those who are engaging in these very hostile discussions in a manner that is really, I don't believe is pleasing to Allah Azza wa Jal at all.
Yes.
the way they're carrying it out. We've seen the scholars of the past, how they would engage with one another, the discussions they would have amongst one another, even if they disagreed, right? And even if they wrote books on one another, they continued. But then when there was times when they had to come together against the Mongols and so on and so forth, they were a united front. You know? And this is what exactly right now, what's happening right now. Wallahi, our heart bleeds.
Yes.
Are we going to exert all of our efforts with dealing with the issues on the ground at this moment in time, especially when we have a lot of these modern day ideologies that are ripping the aqeedah of our children, of our youngsters? We're facing some very serious challenges. And I'm not saying that these discussions are not important.
Yes.
So no one twists my words.
Yes.
Have these discussions, but have it in a controlled manner.
Yes.
That is a lot more civilized.
Yes. Ustadh, on this topic of trying to please everyone and, you know, being in the community, we're all subject to criticism. We're subject to the naysayers, people who have something to say against us. But at the same time, there's also another problem whereby we do things for the sake of popularity. We say things to please our crowd as opposed to saying things which are true. And that can also be problematic in that sense when we do things for the sake of fame. Now, I know you're someone who has experienced, you know, considerable fame throughout his time in the da'wah. How have you personally dealt with the issue of fame and doing things for fame?
I think it's important to take into consideration that we have responsibility. We are ambassadors of the Prophet. May peace and blessings be upon him. Right? So if we're not telling the people what they need to hear, right, then that's a problem. A good sheikh, a good da'iyah, he tells the people what they need to hear, not what they want to hear.
Yeah.
Right? And that's extremely important. Right? It's a religious obligation. وَإِذْ أَخَذَ اللَّهُ مِيثَاقَ الَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْكِتَابَ لَتُبَيِّنُنَّهُ لِلنَّاسِ. Right? Allah took a covenant upon the people of knowledge that they clarify to the people. If we're just going to constantly just think about what's going to please the people, wallahi, eventually they're just going to turn on us. And the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam told us this: مَنِ الْتَمَسَ رِضَى النَّاسِ بِسَخَطِ اللَّهِ. Right? Whoever tries to please the people and in the process he displeases Allah Azza wa Jal, the people will become angry with him. Right? Allah will make them angry with him and Allah will become displeased with that individual. And if you do the opposite will happen. You go after what pleases Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, doing the right thing. And this is a key word, doing the right thing. Sometimes we present things in a way that is actually not the right way to be presenting it.
Yes.
And then you end up losing people. But you can actually present in the right way, but say it with determination and be assertive about it. And this is the right thing. But the way you bring it across, right? Like, subhanAllah, the other day I heard about, there was a bit of a fuss. I think it's maybe worth mentioning. It was at one of the events. And I brought the example of the lady who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgave for quenching the thirst of a dog.
Yes.
What did this lady used to do? Let me ask you, Kamal.
Yeah, it was the famous story. She was a prostitute.
Use the word prostitution, right? Is there any other way that we can really bring this across?
There might be a euphemism. There might be a word that we can use, but my vocabulary.
So this is the exact word that the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam used. Like, and a lady got upset. Why is he using this word? Habib, this is the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And she was upset at the fact that we use this term when this is the reality of the situation, right? And that's when I realized, look, you know, are we going to start censoring a hadith now? There's a lot that I had to speak about, isms and schisms and that which is extremely colorful and whatever have you. It wasn't easy addressing these issues, right? And I honestly thought that I would have a lot of issues. But this is what our youth are suffering from. I need to tell them what they need to hear. And subhanAllah, as I was speaking about these issues, I won over a lot of the youth by trying to speak about these sensitive issues that can rock the boat. And I think that's what a lot of people really appreciate about myself as well. Like, you know, you get what you see, you know. I'm not going to try and sugarcoat it. But we just have to kind of like present it in a way that inshallah is digestible.
So there's obviously the polar other extreme whereby we say, oh, I'm going to tell them what they need to hear and I'm not going to have any reservations about how I say it.
That's very important.
That's also problematic as well, because you can fall into hot water for something like
at times, even if you look at the da'wah of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he left off certain things, right? So that he can perhaps maybe do it at a better time.
Yes.
Does that make sense? Like even Imam Al-Bukhari rahimahullah ta'ala in Sahih, he chaptered one of the hadith, باب من ترك بعض الاختيار مخافة أن يقصر على فهم بعض الناس فيقع في أشد منه. Whoever leaves of certain things because the understanding of the people is just not ready for it.
Yes.
And he perhaps, chooses a much better time to get that across to them. And the evidence that was used was لولا قومك حديث أحد بكفر لنقضت الكعبة جعلت له بابين. Right? If it wasn't for your tribe, he's speaking to Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, right, being new to Islam, I would have rebuilt the Kaaba, but they would have probably maybe apostated.
Yes.
So we have to take that into consideration, the masalih and the mafasid and so on and so forth. And لا يجوز لا يجوز تأخير البيان عن وقت الحاجة. This is what you study in usul fiqh, right? It's not allowed when it's needed there and then, right? To stray away from the truth itself. People need it. That's like a form of deception for the people, not telling them what they need. However, it can be delayed to a more appropriate time.
Yes.
إلى وقت الحاجة is also correct.
And perhaps in the manner that you deliver the message, you can say it in a manner that they're more prone to accept.
Yeah, that's very, very important. That's an art in within itself. Yes. I'm not saying I've perfected it. I tried my utmost best, bringing it across in a way that is digestible. But, there's still a lot to learn in that sense.
The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was the epitome. He's the master of delivering the message in such a beautiful way, the beautiful manners. Ustadh, I've
even,
heard,
ولو كنت فظا غليظ القلب لانفضوا من حولك. If you were rough and tough and harsh, they would have run away from you. Right? Yes, at times the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam did use harshness when he was required, like with Mu'adh ibn Jabal and others. But the majority of the time he was soft and gentle. Had a smile on his face. I believe it was Jarir ibn Abdullah. He said, there's never a time that I saw the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam except he was smiling. Allah. Right? In Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah ta'ala, he would overpower his opponents with a smile. Allah. Like if you have the truth, why do you need to get angry?
Yes.
Right? You don't need to start being abusive or speak in an insulting way and whatever have you.
It's very beautiful. Ustadh, I've heard you speak about something before, and I just wanted you to just go over this again because I believe there is, it's relevant to this discussion we're having right now. And that's when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes your haiba or your nobility from amongst the people. Your fame perhaps is removed from the people. Does this mean that
fame can be a good or a bad thing?
Does this mean you're a problematic individual? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has taken it away from you as a punishment perhaps?
I think what you're referring to is when Ibn al-Jawzi rahimahullah ta'ala, he mentioned رأيت أقواما من المنتسبين إلى العلم أهملوا نظر الله عز وجل في الخلوات فمحى محاسن ذكر في الجلوات. Right? The reason why I've memorized it is because I always remind myself of it. Allah has given me a position within the Muslim Ummah, and I have to, make sure that I don't misuse it, that I don't misappropriate it. I have a responsibility. Allah can take this responsibility and give it to someone else. So what does he say? I saw those who ascribe to knowledge stop being conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala behind closed doors. Right? They've got a face in the public, and then behind closed doors is a different person. Maybe he's watching or doing things that he shouldn't be doing, thinking that he can get away with it. Right? So what did Allah do to them? He caused the good things that are mentioned about them in public to also disappear. فَكَانُوا مَوْجُودِينَ كَالْمَعْدُومِينَ لَا حَلَاوَةَ لِرُؤْيَتِهِمْ وَلَا قَلْبَ يَحْنُ إِلَى لِقَائِهِمْ. Right? There was no halawa, there was no sweetness in wanting to see them, and the heart stopped yearning for them. Right? Our private sins, wallahi, can destroy, how we are perceived in the public. It definitely can. And you lose everything. And I've seen this happen time and time again. May Allah Azza wa Jalla protect us. But there's something I try to remind myself of time and time again. We are in a position of responsibility, and we will be asked about it. Yes, people look at us and think, oh, he's got all of this fame, he has this huge social media following. Wallahi, Habibi, it's terrifying. Like I was telling them yesterday at the event, it could be the editor that enters into Al-Jannah and we're thrown into the hellfire. Right? The editor. And that is because maybe we're not sincere. Wallahi, Kamal, sometimes the shaitan comes to me and he whispers, just say that again, right? Say that again. Perhaps maybe add this and add that. So it can come out a lot better and it can go viral. Wallahi, the shaitan says this to me all the time. Right? That's why, before the act, while we're doing the act, we have to be constantly fighting our nafs. And after as well, did we really do it for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal?
Do you have any rituals or habits that you might do to, protect your sincerity?
Well, what I'll mention, inshallah ta'ala, is a statement of Sulaiman ibn Dawud al-Hashimi. And I think it's better that it comes from the statement. Sulaiman ibn Dawud al-Hashimi, who Imam Ahmad rahimahullah ta'ala mentioned about, right? يصلح أن يكون خليفة للمسلمين. Right? And then Imam Al-Shafi'i rahimahullah ta'ala, he mentioned, ما رأيت أعقل من هذين. Imam Ahmad and also Shafi'i. Imam Ahmad said about him, he's fit enough to become the Khalifa of the Muslim. He's not a household name. Many of us don't actually know about him, right? Imam Shafi'i said, I haven't heard or seen anyone that is more smarter than these two, Imam Ahmad and also Sulaiman and Dawud al-Hashimi. For those who don't know Imam Ahmad and Imam Shafi'i, Imam Ahmad, Imam Shafi'i, Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Malik, they're the four great Imams of fiqh.
Yes.
Right? That inshallah everyone should know about, inshallah. Right? So he says something very powerful. Right? ربما أحدث بحديث ولي نية. I might be narrating a hadith and I have a particular intention. Perhaps he's doing it for the sake of Allah. He's corrected in intention. Like think about a long hadith. Hadith Jibreel. Let's just say 10 lines. As he's narrating the hadith, because back in the day they would narrate the hadith and the students would write it down or memorize it, and then they would go and narrate it to those who came after them, and this is how a chain of narration would be formed. I might be narrating the narration, he says, and I have an intention. As I get to maybe line 5 or line 6, my intention begins to change. Maybe because I really thought about this hadith, right? And then one day it just clicked. You see other people walking into the masjid. Yeah. Now the masjid is getting packed. And the shaitan is whispering, try to impress them with your memorization and your ilm and so on and so forth. SubhanAllah. And then right at the end he says, وَرُبَّ حَدِيثٍ وَاحِدٍ يَحْتَاجُ إِلَى النِّيَّاتِ. Right? Perhaps one hadith, just one hadith requires multiple intentions. Wow. If he's saying this about one hadith, then how about a whole lecture that you're delivering? Don't you think you should be constantly battling with yourself? And am I still sincere? What am I doing? Like, am I just trying to catch their eye and impress them and whatever have you?
Oh,
right?
It's a constant juhud, constant struggle to make sure that we have that sincerity. And I can imagine how difficult it is, even for everyone that is in the da'wah space. I speak for myself first and foremost. We don't know if any of this is accepted, but we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept it. Yeah. Ustadh Abu Taymiyyah, the future of the Muslim community. I know yourself, you are involved with Akhi Ayman. You're working in a mentorship role, perhaps with different other students of knowledge, helping them grow in the Muslim space. What is your hope for the future of the Muslim community?
Wallahi, my hope is that we take our religions a lot more seriously. Right? Like I said, sides have been chosen. Lines have been drawn. We are reaching the very late stages of the end of time. Right? And we really need to get our act together. If we're seeing, subhanAllah, people in their masses following streamers, becoming glued to what they say,
yes,
right? Brainwashed by them. Even though these streamers, a lot of them are talking absolute garbage, yani. Right? They're just literally jumping up and down, doing backflips in a river, in the cold, yani, doing all sorts of crazy stuff, yani, What do you think is going to happen tomorrow when the Dajjal comes? Dajjal, even though he has what kafir written across his forehead, like I keep making this joke, but it's not a joke, and everyone starts laughing when I say this. Like, I honestly fear that there will come a time people are going to say, oh, you don't know what's inside of his heart. Don't we hear this all the time? Right? You see filth and evil online and people try to rectify the situation. The guy has a beautiful heart. You don't know what's in his heart. Right? Yes, he may be a good person, but I have to judge what is upon the apparent and try to combat that so it doesn't spread out to everybody else.
Yes.
In a manner that is befitting. And you got the Dajjal who's going to be doing all these tricks that he has up his sleeve and that's going to leave you in awe. And what do you think the people are going to do? Right?
Yes.
So it's very dangerous times, and that which will help you distinguish between right and wrong then and also now is none other than knowledge. There is a part of knowledge that everyone needs. I'm not saying you have to become a scholar, even though I would love that for everyone.
Yes.
But there is that which every single one of us needs to learn. Right? We can't function. Wallahi, Kamal, I wouldn't be exaggerating if I said 99% of the Instagram messages that I receive, my DMs, are people's societal problems, and just about all of them could have been prevented with a bit of knowledge. And prevention is better than a cure.
Yes.
A bit of knowledge, right? Could have prevented this, subhanAllah. If we took our religion a little bit more seriously. Like the amount of time that we spend on social media, don't you think it's fair? A fraction of that we could give that to Allah.
Yes.
Right? Check your social media usage. It's through the roof.
Your screen time.
Screen time and everything. It's through the roof. A fraction of that, give it to Allah. Let me learn about my religion. Perhaps it may help me navigate and maneuver around the challenges of today.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is very important. A last closing message for the youth, Ustadh Abu Taymiyyah, just to connect their hearts with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we'll wrap up on this.
My young brothers and sisters, right? Death is around the corner, right? Any of us can depart. Sometimes we live this life as if we have 60 or 70 years ahead of us. Yes, the hadith did say the average lifespan of my ummah is between 60 and 70. أعمار أمتي بين 60 و 70. But wallahi, we don't know whether we're going to make it to tomorrow, right? We don't know whether we're going to get out of the studio. We might get hit by a car crash. May Allah forbid that. Anything can happen. You know, what are we going to take with us that will perhaps save us when we stand in front of Allah Azza wa Jal? Right? You see our brothers and sisters that are being tortured, they're being massacred. A genocide is going on and it's causing our hearts to bleed. Right? It's causing our hearts to bleed. I've heard brothers say, I wish I was in that position. If I was bombed, I'll go, right? I'll go to Jannah. The same way all these babies and these elders, innocent, they're being massacred, right? You know, a genocide is taking place. I wish I could be so I can leave this world. Habibi, it's the world's biggest open prison, right? Perhaps for one reason or the other, Allah chose that for them and we have been deprived. If you want anything close to that, I'll remind you of this hadith of the Prophet ﷺ when he said, Al-mutamassiku bisunnati inda fasadi ummati lahu ajru shaheed. The one who holds on to my sunnah, when the people have become corrupt, this person will get the reward of a shaheed. Right? Especially right now, any of us could pass away. I lost 3 relatives. Wallahi, they were all in their 20s. One of them was my younger brother, was stabbed in the neck. The other one was a cousin, stabbed in the chest. All in the space of maybe 8-9 months, I think it was. All happening around the same time. Right? It shows you that someone can leave this world in his 20s. So, you know, fill up your scale of good deeds with as many good deeds as you can, inshallah ta'ala, while you're still alive, while you have the opportunity. And inshallah ta'ala, it'll help us a lot, especially in today's day and age. Bi-idhnillahi ta'ala.
Jazakallah khairan, Ustad. It's been a pleasure having you on the podcast. Very important reminders you've delivered throughout the course of this podcast. It's been very important. I pray all of our viewers found benefit in this very, somber discussion towards the end, but a very beautiful discussion. Until next time, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.